Are we live? Oh, it's not.
Oh.
Hello! We are going to try a live this time on Facebook, and then we'll upload to our YouTube page. We are The Scoop. I'm Farah. Welcome to our second episode on ABA and burnout. So we want to do this just because this is such a, how do we describe this? It's such a
It's a big topic.
big topic.
It's important. It's something that everyone goes through at some point in their life.
And we just think it's super important because the field does have such a, high capacity, I don't know if that's the right word, but it's common in education and ABA and research and things like that just because of what we do. So we think it's really important topic based off of some of the information we've gathered and people we've talked to, professionals we've talked to in the fields. So some of this will be some things, opinion, and some of it, that we've picked up through the field and, through our own experiences. And then some will be very research-based. Most of it will be research-based, but some of it will be just some of our experiences. So, does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, you're already...
I'm already off camera.
I know!
It's just like one of those things for me. I can't,
It just makes me laugh. Because you're like, I'm here.
That's just gonna be like my, what do
Your
I call
thing?
it? Yeah, like my trait or something.
It's Nicole there. All right, cool. All right, so we're gonna just I think our thing, what we want to keep trying to do is just be real and just be relaxed. Please give us, comments or any information that you want us to do in the future. I can't say that enough because we want to be able to help in Sonnenberg, and then obviously outside of the field, just bring some awareness to all of this. So anyway, I'll start and then I'll kind of hand it over when you feel like you're good to go with jumping in with some of the research that you found.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, I had some meetings in the last couple of months with one of our mentors, and some of the things that we really discussed, I don't know where she got all of her research from, but some of our discussions and things that I think are through some of the experiences that she has had and just in some of her studies, is that we put kind of a Band-Aid on burnout and how not to burn out. And so we were really interested, Nicole and I were really interested in kind of doing a little bit more research on that and finding out if that was kind of true. If burnout, we talk a lot about self-care, and I think that's the biggest thing that you hear over and over again is self-care. And yes, that's true, but that's very, that's immediate reinforcement, and that's just kind of to take care of me that day or that week, and it's not sustainable. So I think that was one of the things that I really learned in some of my discussions over time with some of our mentors, and then some of the research that when we were looking through that actually was confirmed and researched, and that very much is something just for the now. Like, it'll make you feel better to go get your hair done. It'll make you feel better to get a pedicure or to whatever it may be. But to have it really sustainable is something that's long term, which of course goes back to everything that we know. We know that there's some things that you can take care of that's going to help immediately, but that's not really what we want long term. So, excuse me. So one of the things that I started to look into was OBM, which is your organizational behavior management. So basically what that is, and I am not an expert in this by any means, this is stuff that I've talked to people, that I've read, stuff that we've kind of looked into that's collaborated. We're seeing the same theme, I would say, throughout the research that we're doing, is that, to apply the systems that we apply in ABA. So we talked about that in our first episode, what ABA is, Applied Behavior Analysis, and kind of that's what we do. We work with our learners and our clients and the kids, adults, and how that looks. So it's systematically and it's reinforcing, it's prompting, reinforcing, what motivates, those kind of things. So it's the same with our staff. It's the same with each other, except a lot of companies, and I think I can really say this is a newer thing, besides the ABA that was started way back in the 60s and things, that people are just applying, and they kind of go back to the original of what HR kind of has been started. Human resources, even the name of human resources is changing. To that kind of old-fashioned one time a year, we check in, hi, how you doing, blah, 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 let's do this, and then it's another year. Well, that doesn't prevent burnout. That might prevent the next week or month, maybe. But so that was what a lot of what we read about. Nicole going into that as well. But OBM really goes into about changing the environment and about that reinforcement and the application. So I'm just going to read what OBM is. I think that will help, and then I'll pass it on to you because I think that you have found a lot of good stuff in there. But it is the study and application of ABA in organizations that focus on assessing changing work environments to improve. So what I kind of just said, you're changing the environment just like we do with the kids. It is actually bottom up and down. So it's not, what that means is it's not just I come in, Nicole comes in, supervises and says, this is what I want you to do, and we skedaddle. That's actually the opposite of what they want you to do. They want you to work together and go back and forth, and we go back to our books. I'm just gonna hold these up real quick because we're gonna keep referencing these books. Is we talk a lot about observation versus evaluation, and that's kind of how I looked at it. Is you're gonna be observing and actually getting data. It's not going to be an evaluation, which is what we're told to do. We want to actually get data on what's happening, what's occurring. So that's what OBM is, and I'll kind of hand it over to you, Nicole, with the research that you found, because I think it really supports some more stuff that I can kind of interject and but I think it'd be great to kind of hear about what you found.
Yeah, and I think just real quick, going back to like the observation versus evaluation, is that oftentimes when you are evaluating someone's performance, you're doing that in a Likert scale of like 1, 2, 3. You either are great, medium, or needs improvement kind of piece. I mean, you're even graded like that in school. And so with that, it is very subjective. So if you don't have the observation piece within there, and that's where it becomes a little tricky, and what are you actually evaluating? However, in the research, there are also a lot of different ways that the researchers are measuring burnout and tying burnout to different areas. So one thing that I was looking at is, and I'm gonna try not to butcher authors' names here, but one of them was looking at personality traits as it tied to burnout in ABA and with ABA therapists. And this was by Hurt, Christ, Molaski, and McCord. In 2013. So they looked at other people's personality traits. You can take like personality assessments and things like that. So they looked at, okay, well, what types of people maybe show the most burnout or have the most burnout, and kind of correlated that with how to help in those areas. Because ultimately, when we all know there's a lot of burnout in this field, and ultimately that affects the clients more than anything. And so a lot of people are looking at that and trying to address that in research, because it is so important that we kind of address this so that we can continue to service our clientele. They found a personality trait that really links to a lot of like mental health. So people that experience more like mental health pieces, and they kind of gauge this based off of many different surveys that I won't go into, have an increased like burnout rate. And so they kind of concluded that there's other ones as well, but that was the one that was most like correlated to burnout in individuals, I guess.
Did it say anything about those individuals, more of those individuals being attracted to the field too, because of the help kind of factor and the,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah, and they have a lot of like, and you can have different personality traits. Like they talked about like neuroticism is the one that was like the highest, and they gave like characteristics of that, like subcategories of that, and it did link to like people that might experience like depression or have some of those areas. And then they also did like, they looked at openness, job satisfaction, agreeableness, conscientiousness.
Those are the subcategories?
Yeah, so
Okay.
they kind of looked at all of these like subcategories, and they also concluded that like your job satisfaction goes down or decreases, like your job performance, as burnout happens. And they also stated at the beginning that burnout is something that's unavoidable because you don't find out that someone is burnt out until they're burnt out. So they were looking at personality, because if they did these personality assessments, maybe they can conclude that these people are more like at a risk for burnout, so that maybe they could like catch it in time, but you don't know a person's burnt out until they're burnt out.
Right.
So that was kind of this study. It's kind of interesting. There are some of the studies they do that I'm not familiar with, or assessments that they did that I don't know about, which was also interesting. I also have a study by Gibson, Gray, and Hastings, and they looked at supervision support. So they looked at more of like what type of supervisor do individuals have that might limit ABA therapists from experiencing burnout.
Oh.
And they did this with ABA in schools as well.
Okay.
And what they concluded is that if you have a supervisor who displays empathy, who is personable, who gives reinforcement, that they are more likely to maintain their staff and limit that burnout, which makes sense.
Well, that's interesting too, and I think I like how it's all of the studies that we've been looking at kind of all correlate, because I can piggyback off of that with the OBM stuff that we were looking at, with what you were saying with empathy and that personality. Is one of the studies that we were looking at, and to be honest with you, we got this from a YouTube podcast, and I will find out what that is and I'll post it on there so we have that for you guys, because it was on one of our CEU sites that we go and we look at for information. But they reference Partington, Pamela and Trevor Stokes, and the scooping performance, and that directly correlates to what you're saying, because it's all based on that social. So and having more of a reinforcement schedule and being able to measure that, and making an operational definition and saying exactly what you're looking for, and that again, this bottom up, top down, that it goes back and forth. So if Nicole comes in and is supervising me, I also go back and do the same. They call it scooping, which I'll tell you what that is in a second. I also do it back, and then she does it back to me. So it's this back and forth, that nobody's higher or lower than the other, and it ties into the way that you're getting that information, because it's observation. It's not about, I'm going to evaluate you in a way that's going to demean you, or this is what you need to do. They want to stay away from that. So it's strictly data. So SCOOP stands for Systematic Carousel of Operations of Performance. And like I said, I'll find out exactly what that podcast is if you guys are interested in looking at that, because it's really quite interesting, and you can get some CEUs on there too. But you do time samples, so it's just you label what you're looking for, so that definition, and then you're going into sessions, and they go through kind of that whole percentage of 4-to-1 ratio, that this is what you're going to do every minute, and then you evaluate, you go through just what we do with the clients in ABA. It's the exact same thing, and it's just data. So the next time that you come in, the same thing occurs, and you want to see that increase or decrease depending on what you're looking for. Their specific thing that they talked about was giving compliments or giving, I'm trying to see the exact thing, it's feedback, and how you praise somebody, general praises or specific praises. And you can do that with the clients and things like that. So anybody that's not in ABA, this might be a little bit confusing, but it basically is just making sure that you're giving the feedback and you have access to that reinforcement throughout. So it's being empathetic, it's giving this looks great, those kind of things. And again, it can be general or very specific. You make that kind of call. But I thought that was very interesting because there's all data on that. And we can do the same thing that we do with our kiddos or our adults or whoever the population that we're working with. We do the same thing. So I think that was really great. They talked about, when I was talking about the HR kind of thing, with the yearly, they're saying that is so counterproductive and so counterintuitive to what we want to do in the field. You need to be doing daily, weekly, monthly, as they call scooping, or just this back and forth interaction to make sure that they're getting that, so we avoid burnout. You have somebody come in and they say, and they're empathetic, mm-hmm. and all the things that you were just describing, and you have that back and forth interaction and you feel good. The data actually went up, they took as well, it went up to them asking for more. Mm-hmm. And saying, please come in, I want you to see this, blah, 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 and can you scoop me today, they would say. So I thought that was really cool, because you don't want your staff to be running away from you or saying like, I'm sick today, because I don't want, that something's not quite right. So you do want that back and forth, and that it should be fun, and that avoids burnout too. So they talk a lot about that and the data with that. So yeah, daily, weekly, monthly, not that just once a year. Boundaries, it's another big one, is mm-hmm. that you feel comfortable enough to talk to your supervisor and your other staff and your techs to say, I can't do that right now. I don't have enough, time or whatever. It's just not, and setting those boundaries in a very healthy way, because that sets you up for long term too and avoids burnout. So that was another big thing that they talked about.
Yeah. I mean, let's go back to self-care really quick, because everyone not everyone, I just think that in society we say like, okay, self-care.
We say that a lot.
And to that means that, like you were saying earlier, that means that you get your hair done, or that you go and exercise, and that you do like some sort of activity. So I have some research that kind of like outlines that, and I think that people are like maybe getting some of them confused, because this article really like outlines like what is self-care, what's professional support look like, what's professional development look like, life balance, daily balance, cognitive awareness. So it kind of goes through like all of these categories that in life and in your work experiences could or could not be there. So when I was reading Life Balance, it says that life balance emphasizes the importance of having identity outside of one's work and engaging in enjoyable activities, which sounds to me what a lot of people might like describe as self-care.
That's true.
Whereas self-care, it talks about one's health and well-being, and promotes effective and appropriate use of self in the professional role within the context of sustaining holistic health and well-being. And this is all from Solwick and D. Longchamp. So they did an article on this. So I see that after reading this, there might be a little bit of this like mix up.
Well, do you think life balance is also boundaries too in some aspects?
Yeah,
because you're kind of setting up your own outside life because they
mm-hmm.
can mush together if you let them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that also could be added, and kind of is a running theme, is this boundaries, and and I think it's fine, all the things that you mentioned, I think this is more of my opinion now, but it's not about like, oh, I'm going to go out and do my hair once to make myself feel better. It's about this placement and this systematic, this access to reinforcements as we go along. So exercise would be continual. It doesn't feel good if you go for a week or two or a month and then you're done.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like that continual balance, right?
Yeah. And I think balance might be even, because they even have on here daily balance. So it talks about strategies that consist of like small actions, like taking breaks throughout the workday, avoiding like overcommitting to work responsibilities, which also can be tied to some of our integrity pieces that we talk about. All of it kind of intertwines.
For sure.
And so boundaries is huge. What happens if you don't have boundaries is maybe you're more sustainable to burnout.
For sure.
Or less, I don't know.
Well, and in boundaries too, this goes back to also organizational behavior management. It goes into systems. So it's that they said the biggest thing that in this podcast that I was talking about earlier, and just through some of my mentoring, is that it's systems. That's one thing that we've been working at Sonnenberg for about 2.5 years, is really putting systems and our values, which we, again, the books that we referenced in the beginning, the pro-social and the nonviolent communication, are your values, your vision, all of the stuff that we talked about in the first podcast, is having those systems in place, and are they effective? What organizational behavior management does is comes in, and that's what they're going to help with, is to put in these systems so we can see if it's actually working. That's why you need data. That's why you need something that's consistent across days, weeks, months, not just once a year. Because how do you know if it's working if an HR sits you down and says, well, we have one incident from 6 months ago that, this happened. We'd like you to improve on that. But the last 3 months have been great. I mean, how many times has something like that happened or reversed, where you're like,
you're saying butts again.
Yeah, butts, exactly. So that's really, really important, is to really look at your systems and how you adjust so it works for your population too, because everybody's a little bit different, and your staff, and you don't have happy staff or staff that can avoid or help with burnout. I know you can't avoid it, that's how you adjust, and I think that's one thing that we're really good at, is looking at what's working, what's not working, and it's okay to say, I don't even know, like where do we start? How do we start with this? Well, let's start by observing. Let's start by getting a baseline. Let's start by seeing where we're at, and then taking consistent data. So some of the things that I thought would be really good for even business owners or other people that are in the fields is that one thing that we've really worked on in the last year is really working on this organizational behavior management without even realizing that we're working on it to quite the capacity that we are. So really taking pay for people, that doing it on incentive based, doing it on this is what you can do, and this is the outcome of what you did, and so this is how you get paid. This is your access to your performance. So that's a really big thing that OBM really talks about, is having it just like we do with our clients, is having incentive based. That's a really big thing. It's just doing it the correct way. And a lot of times you have to kind of find out what works for you and each person. So that's really important, is to keep chugging away on that and really making sure that you've got that right. But that's like one of the number one things that they talk about. And not doing yearly HR check-ins, that it should be daily. Honestly, we should be checking with people, and weekly and monthly, and checking up on to see how they're doing. So that's a big thing that we're doing too, is we have a system that we're doing beginning, intermediate, advanced, kind of is what we're calling it right now, and they can go as they want to. And so we're doing a system like that, so they have daily and weekly access to getting raises, or getting information, or getting research articles, support, reaching out, CEUs, all different things, that so we can advance in the fields. Our policies, if they have a question, they can go back online and pull that up and get credit for that. These are two of the biggest areas that I had read about that were really important, and we're doing them.
Mhm.
So I think that's really cool to kind of work through that as well. That will hopefully avoid burnout as well, because you can kind of pick and choose what you do. What do you think about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and as far as like creating systems and structure, essentially, right? I mean, I'm going to tie it back to ACT a little bit. I'm going to tie it back to pro-social too, because what we're doing is creating equitable access, which is one of our company values. And so, in also reading some of pro-social, they talk about like collective groups, and groups that work well together have the following things, and systems are included in there. I can read some other ones too, as they really look at, so they look at things like shared identity and purpose, so that goes along with our mission, our values, and why we have those things. Equitable distribution of benefits, contributions, collective relations with other groups, authority to self-govern, fast and fair conflict, responding to helpful and unhelpful behavior, monitoring agreed behaviors. So all of this also ties back into how to incorporate like collaborative groups, and what it looks like to have integrity based off of what group you are associating with or a part of.
Okay.
Now, with integrity, if I'm a part of a group and I'm not aligning with their core values and their beliefs and their systems, then I might have some integrity to restore.
Okay.
And by saying that, it also kind of goes into the thing where systems are not created as individual. The feedback's individual, the reinforcement tied to it is individual, but the system itself is for the collective group. So the group as a whole has these systems in
Which
place.
is done by collecting data.
Right.
And so you can create those systems. So one of the big things I have in my notes over and over again is, do you trust your supervisors? Do you like or trust the people that you work with? That is an opinion, but it's based off of how you feel when it goes back to those. Do you feel heard? Do you feel like you have a voice? Those kind of things. Those how the systems are made. Is
Right.
based off of that feedback and the individuals as far as that, but then collectively putting that system is so you have equitable access, like you said, and all of the values that we have. I also feel, this is an opinion, but I think I can support this pretty heavily, is that changes. Sometimes, like we changed equitable access because it just didn't quite hit what we were trying to do. So it's okay to say like what's not working. And again, you go back, you look at the data, you look at something's not right, because we keep getting this feedback over and over again, and then we have turnover because of this feedback, for example. So I think that's why data is so important, and to have that consistent data as you go along. So your data didn't change, so it adjusted everything else. It's been consistent. So that's one thing that we're really talking a lot about, is having the right data.
Yeah, and within a system, what's the pinpointing? Because if you have a whole system and you're taking data, I would want to know, like, sometimes it's not the whole system. Sometimes
Right.
it's a piece of that system that is out of alignment. And so with data, we can determine and pinpoint that maybe behavior that is out of alignment.
For sure. Yeah, it's super interesting. And it's interesting that people will see it a little bit differently too, based off of the information that they have. So I keep looking at my notes here, and I'm reading like mind dump, communication, back and forth, those kind of things. That's why the top to bottom and bottom to top are so important, because you want that information. You want people to open up and talk and feel heard. I think I hear that all the time. It's like, I don't feel heard, or you're not
And-
listening, or however it is that you want to put it.
Well, and what is if I say I'm not heard, that's going to mean something different to me as an individual than it might mean to you when you say that. So it goes back to the observation as well. So
Good point.
I feel not heard, but what does that look like, and what behaviors led up to me not feeling heard?
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's
a good point, because a lot of times what we've seen when we sit somebody down and we kind of go through what's going on, and we're not really surprised anymore that originally what was said is actually not at all why they're not feeling heard or why they're upset or whatever feeling that they're telling us. It actually was something much different. There was something underlying, and I would think the majority of the time it usually is something underlying.
Yeah.
And that it came out at this surface problem or whatever was occurring. So it's very interesting to keep really getting to what really is maintaining that behavior that they're feeling or whatever. So I think that's very good to talk about that. 'Cause it happens a
And
lot.
feelings are hard. A lot of times my feelings come out as thoughts and not feelings. So instead of saying I'm mad because this happened, I'm gonna say like my thought.
So can you give an example of that?
So instead of saying I'm mad, I say I'm feeling like you don't like me or listen to me.
Oh, okay.
So if I add that word I'm feeling to my thought, it's not a feeling, it's a thought. But sometimes things come out as I'm feeling you don't like me.
So you're putting in what you think I am doing, but that's you're just thinking that because you don't really know how I feel.
And I didn't state an actual feeling either.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it is. It's something, again, it's communication and really talking about it and getting to what it is, and you have to feel, or you have to be comfortable. I don't know how to say that exactly, but if you're uncomfortable or you're not, what am I trying to say? If I'm like Nicole, in my words, is not approachable, I'm not going to go to her and I'm not going to communicate with her, and therefore I'm going to avoid, and nothing gets done, nothing gets resolved. And Nicole might see, oh, Farrah's, what's going on? Like, she can observe me, so that she might reach out, or what have you, which is why observation is so important, to not go take it off of somebody else's word, because that's common too in the workplace, is I saw this, or I think so and so feels like this, when that's not at all how it is, by giving their opinion. So again, back to observation, consistency with that. It goes back to building relationships.
Yeah, and you get in trouble by attacking other people's emotions.
Yes, you do.
And so allowing them to state their feelings rather than you assuming their feelings.
And when they say they're feeling, like, define that. Like, what do you mean? Because what we might define, our definition will probably be different.
Yeah.
Almost always. So I think that's really good. I also think I've seen a lot, including myself over the years, is one or two things happen, right? And now everybody feels this way, or a lot of people feel this way, and it's one or two people, and now you're like panicking, or whatever, as a supervisor. So again, getting the facts, getting what's really happening, observing, going back to that, I think is really important, and really a life lesson in every instance, really, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think something that you always say too is like, well, why? So like finding that why, and just like we do with our clients, like, why are they engaging in this type of behavior? We're gonna do that same thing with every situation. Well, why?
Yeah.
And gathering that information or that data. Because if we don't, we are just making assumptions, and we might be making assumptions for large groups of individuals that just, quite frankly, isn't true.
That's very true. Yeah, the why is the most important part. Something happens there's always a reason behind that. There's never just a nothing. So yeah, I think that those are all really, really important. So what else? Do we have anything else that we want to? Active listening is the biggest thing too. We didn't really completely talk about that. again, observation without evaluation, and really, this, one of our mentors always says to repeats back, so what I'm hearing you say, right?
Yeah.
Who is
That's
that?
nice, yeah.
Yep, and always making sure that you're interpreting really what they're saying or repeating back to what they're really saying. Because a lot of times sometimes when I hear, let's say Nicole says something to me and I say, is this what you're trying to say? And am I understanding you right? No, actually that's not at all what I'm trying to say, you know what I mean? So it's really important that we're repeating what actually is being said and that we're taking that information and getting it as best we can.
Yeah.
Because I think that's common too. We'll leave meetings and we all come back the next week or the next day or whatever it is that we're doing and we're like, that's not what I said. Yeah, and we're all like, huh? So I'm really big on taking notes, so we can look back, and I try to write it as best I can. But again, that's somewhat of an interpretation too, because it's my notes on what we discussed. So I repeat myself a lot, which is annoying, but I really want to make sure that we're all hearing the same thing.
Yeah.
Because that's easy to do too, especially with 5-6 people in a meeting.
Yeah, it's very hard. Some Q&As would be good as well.
Yes.
We're working on that.
Yep. So always doing that.
And I mean, to maybe kind of wrap us up here, I would encourage everyone to maybe think about what actions would cause you burnout, what self-care really is, and what you might do moving forward, and how you can encourage others and yourself to do what self-care is, which is living a healthy lifestyle, and that means different for everyone.
And your boundaries, right?
And your boundaries.
And having boundaries, consistency, that could change, but what that looks like. But I think that's really important. And it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
That's
our hardest thing,
Mm-hmm.
is not being able to say no, being able to say I don't know, because we don't have all the answers all the time. No one does. And setting those boundaries. Maybe outlining what those boundaries are, because if you don't know what they are, then how do you set them?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So I hope that this was helpful, or makes everybody think a little bit on what you can do in your life. And this is, in work or any part of your life, really. It's really important you have that balance and you're hitting those points of reinforcement throughout your life. So, you can sustain, not completely burning out, but knowing how to kind of pull back and having, again, this kind of balance. So thanks for joining us on our second episode. Please let us know what else you'd like to hear, and hopefully this was helpful. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.